Okay, let's apply a pattern to our image underneath. We're going to just try to simulate like a tiny little fish scale pattern here. Now obviously if you're looking into here, this pattern can be pretty random. So you could make yours random, but it's eventually going to repeat because in Illustrator it is a true pattern. Okay, so let's grab pardon me, an ellipse tool, and we're going to drag out, it's kind of an oval shape because we're going to make sort of those fish scale shapes. Okay, and I'm going to select it and I'm going to remove the stroke. And I'm going to apply a gradient, oops, a gradient not to the stroke, but to the fill. Okay, I'm going to play with my gradient tool here and I'm going to rotate it down. And I'm going to move, oops, I'm going to move this guy up. And I'm going to extend it down. Okay, so I'm kind of just playing around with it fading, but I think I kind of want to keep it. I don't want any white, like if I'm looking here, I don't want any white in my shoe. I just kind of want something like this. Okay, now technically speaking, you only need one circle to make the pattern. I find it easiest to make the circle the size of the pattern that you want, kind of to begin with. I'm going to scale it down. Somewhere like so, that should work. And then I'm going to drag it in to my swatches. Okay, so there it is. So now I'm going to click on this little guy here. It's the edit pattern. Okay, and I'm going to play around with things in here. You can see how it's going to kind of adjust how things are linked to each other. I'm going to go hex by row. That looks good. But I don't particularly like the white in here. So I'm going to change this guy here. It's the pattern tile tool. And I'm going to kind of move this in just a little bit. Maybe something like that. Or we can probably get a little tighter. Okay. Okay, let's say done. Okay, so we don't need this guy anymore because that's our original one. I'm going to grab this shape here and I'm going to apply this pattern to it. Okay, not bad, but I need to rotate it, obviously, so I want it to go into the other direction. So I'm going to select my that shape. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to double click the rotate tool. Now the rotate tool might be under the reflect tool or the scale tool. So I'm going to double click it and I'm not going to transform objects. I'm just going to transform patterns. If you see this, you can play around with how it's rotating. So I want the black, there we go, underneath. And that looks good. Oops. So, oh, I just undid it. There we go. I hide my image underneath. I think that's looking neat. It's just a neat little pattern addition. Let's see what direction it's going on the back. So let's put one on this guy too. But we're just going to keep it up and down. Okay, so now the other thing that we can do here, if we want to put a gradient sort of above the pattern, here's my favorite way of doing it. Okay, so let's just watch the layer stack as I'm doing this. I actually want to make a copy of this shape. I'm going to apply a gradient to it and I'm going to lower the opacity or actually play with layer blend modes, okay? So I'm going to go edit, copy, and then watch my layer stack. I'm going to go edit, paste in place. Okay, so it's pasted another one right above. I'm going to bring that guy down and I'm just going to give it a dark fill. So you can kind of see it sitting right on top of that shape. Okay, so let's give it a gradient fill. Oops, select it. Okay, and I'm going to grab that gradient adjuster and a double click here. I'm going to give it kind of a dark, and then I'm going to double click here. Oops, and I'm going to give it kind of a lighter gray. And I'm kind of winging it actually. I should have looked at my image for a reference. I actually could do a gradient here, so let's try that. I'm going to rotate you, shrink it down a little bit, rotate it around, something similar like that. If I also wanted to kind of darken it under there, I could maybe do a shadow later. Okay, so that looks good. Now what I need to do is lower the opacity of this shape. So I could do it here, but what I'd like you to do is actually open up your appearance panel. Okay, so by clicking here, open the appearance panel or window appearance. Okay, bring this guy up. This is just a neat thing to kind of have open because it's going to log all of your different adjustments that you're making. I'm going to click opacity and I can turn that guy down and you can see that I'm starting to see the gradient, but I'd like you to kind of see what these blend modes do. So what blend modes are in charge of is how transparency is handled in a layer. So it's going to take the lights and make them transparent in a different way than the darks. So it's not going to handle it as one solid shape. It's actually going to go down and treat each one a little bit different. Do you need to know what each one does right now? No, not at all. I would just play around and then decide eventually what you like. Clearly not that one. So here up in the darkened ones, for example, you're going to see how the lights kind of stay a little bit and the dark is what's kind of being played with transparency. That actually looks pretty awesome. If I go to lighten, it's kind of the opposite. So the light, you can see it's kind of what stays and then the dark is what kind of goes. So it kind of depends on what you're working on. I'm going to go with the color burn because I think that looks pretty sweet. So then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Grab this shape, see where it is here. I'm going to go edit, copy. And let's see what happens if I go edit, paste in front. Oh, there we go. So it pastes it in the same place and it's right above it. Right there. Okay, so let us apply to this one. I'm going to get rid of my appearance panel. Let's just grab this so that I make sure I have the right one. Cool. Okay, let's throw a gradient on it. I'm going to hide it because I want to see what's going on here. It's really, I'm going to maybe grab my gradient to come under here, right at the sole. Okay, so grab my gradient tool, bring it in, rotate it down. Do I want it there? Yeah, I think I kind of wanted something maybe like that. Okay, and again, let's go into appearance, or you could, I think, just click on opacity here. Oh, no, I need to grab that shape. Grab my direct select or my selection arrow, go into opacity, and there we go. Yeah. And I'm going to do the same one with this one, color burn. That does not look as good at all, and I think it's because I have more black. So let me try to grab that gradient again with the color burn on it. Yeah, so you can see how the color burn really plays with that black, which I don't necessarily mind, but I don't like how it's different than this one. So I'm going to move this down so we just kind of have a subtle gradient, like so. Okay, so now I've got a pattern layer and I've got a gradient over top of it, and I played with, here in the opacity, I played with what are called layer blend modes. Now if I'm going to give you any advice, it's to use them sparingly. This is as far as I would go in terms of pattern. You could play with blend modes elsewhere, but this is as far as I would go. Okay, so the only other thing that I kind of want to point out in this tutorial for coloring is things like the sole here. Have fun with playing with really subtle gradients. So what I mean by that is if I grab this shape, for example, and again I'm going to grab a gradient and let's just see, I might actually make it slightly darker here to lighter to lighter. See how this is light there? Okay, so let's grab this gradient slider and I'm going to change the color of this guy to be light. Okay, and I'm going to actually add another one by clicking on the gradient and double clicking and making this a little bit darker. Yeah, maybe I'll need to make this one a little bit dark or a little bit lighter. So I'm going to actually switch into my swatches and just drag it up here on this guy. I actually want these shapes to kind of blend together a little bit. Okay, and then if we look at our picture, maybe it goes white and then to a little bit darker over there. So what I could do is slide this one down to here and then possibly add one. Maybe there. And let's go a little bit darker. And then this one, maybe because it's pinned between two darks, I might go all the way white. Oops, no, this one. Okay, so now I've got kind of a neat gradient that flies through, but it's really subtle. And then the one underneath, this guy, I might actually just apply a really light shape. So now you're getting kind of a neat mixing, right? You've got the light to the dark to the light, but it's kind of all the same tones, and so it's being really subtle. It's like this isn't a separate section of shoe, it's just where the shoe kind of shifts in angle. Okay, so if I hide my photo, you can see how I could start to go in and play with gradients everywhere else. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Patterns, layer modes. And then last but not least, I guess I could double check and show you the shadow here. Okay, so I'm going to grab probably just the ellipse tool. Create a shape there. I'm going to make it dark. Let me grab it and throw it all the way underneath. Okay, and then effect, blur. We could do a radial blur, but you could also do a Gaussian blur. And that looks actually pretty good. I might make it a little less. Okay, and I kind of want it a little bit further out. And there, looks good. And then let's hide our picture. Looks pretty good. And if I found that that was a little bit too much, I could always lower that opacity a little bit. Okay, so you can go in and finish gradients everywhere else. I'll finish them for the tutorial, but I'm done talking for the remainder of the tutorial, so you can just kind of tune me out. And if you're interested, see how I'm going to finish this off. Otherwise, you're good to start your own.